Happy Saturn's Day, collective, or Saturn's night. Wanted to check in and do a little bit of cleaning of some. You see some silver and brass out here. I wanted to talk about Saturn a little bit more and tie in why you see all these things laid out in front of the camera. Because today, November 4th, 2023, is when Saturn stationed direct. Now, everyone hears about Mercury going retrograde and Mercury going direct, and that's just like a thing that happens pretty routinely. Mercury moves very fast. Saturn's quite a bit larger, has a longer transit, and it does go retro. It's not like a rare thing, but you often feel it a lot in your life. It's just not a commonly talked about thing, but a lot of times the movements and retrogrades and transits of Saturn impact our lives in some of the most profound ways and mark a lot of serious life events, whether you realize it or not. So I wanted to talk a minute about Saturn on this Saturn's night. Saturn is, I mentioned briefly in the one video, a very large planet. It's got 7 rings. And Saturn generally is characterized by the themes, I guess I should say, linked to Saturn are rules, restrictions, boundaries, delayed gratification, maturity, old age, foundation, anything that is solid and generally benefits from long, hard earned efforts, proficiency that comes from a very long, hard earned walk. So, in terms of body, Saturn governs skeletal system and skin and bones and teeth. And when you think about the effort that goes into maintaining those things and how over time it all tends to show how much work over a long period of time was or was not put in. So, like, for teeth especially, that sort of drudgery of doing your flossing and your whole dental rituals and routines, day by day, you might not be able to tell who's doing the homework, so to speak. But then you get to a certain age, and it's like quite obvious who's been doing the Saturnian things and maintaining their teeth. So same with your skeletal system, same with skincare. If you think about skincare, and the skincare routine, if you're somebody that just sort of like plops down at night and you don't wash your face or whatever, remove your makeup if you wear makeup, moisturize, that kind of thing, that's going to be something that shows, like, who has been doing this over a long period of time and who has not as we all age. So Saturn is very much associated with the limitation, because it feels like a limitation, doesn't it, when you're like, oh, I want to go to bed, but I got my skincare routine, I gotta do my teeth, and all that effort that you put in little by little for all these years. There's nothing more, I guess, nothing more obvious in terms of the reward reaped at the end of a period of time than those sort of like mundane everyday things that add up to become like quite a big payoff in the end. And those of us who skip those things and you go for a lot of years, you end up finding out the hard way. And you get to a certain age and you're like, uh-oh, I got like an emergency dental procedure, I gotta, you end up having, it costs you, like, there is, I guess, a consequence, you might say, to your failure, no judgment here, just your lack of putting in the effort over time. The thing is, the bill always comes due with Saturn is basically the whole motto. And this is why I have the scales right here, scales of justice. Saturn actually exalts in Libra. The Libra is the one archetype in the zodiac. It's the only one that's represented by an inanimate object. Have you ever noticed? Like all of the others are, you know, some sort of animal or hybrid animal or human animal hybrid, whatever. But not Libra. Libra is the scales of justice, and it is a Venus ruled sign. And like have said before with Venus, yeah, Venus is about love, beauty, harmony, peace, balance. But when you think about what um, is required in a society where multiple people with many different interests live, um, what actually is required to achieve balance, harmony, um, collective well-being over time? Discipline, boundaries, structure, a set of rules, right? So it's a very natural fit that Saturn would exalt, or find its joy in Libra, because you can't have the good vibes, peace, harmony, beauty, love, especially in a collective sense. Otherwise, it's just tyranny, In a collective sense, the harmony, the balance comes from the structure, and that is the business of Saturn. Now, Saturn is, it can, I like to say Saturn delays, but it never denies. So, a lot of themes common in people with heavy Saturn placements in their chart, like very Saturnian people. So, what do I mean when I say that? I mean, like, um, if you've ever known somebody who is a Capricorn or an Aquarius, um, and we're just going to stick with sun sign here, but of course, moon, rising, even Venus, those all being very personal placements would apply too. But, given that we don't know those things about a lot of the people we've been friends with or been in contact with, you might know someone's birthday though. You might go, oh yeah, they're born in early January. They're Capricorn. I knew Capricorn. Um, One thing about that archetype that I do think you find will ring true is any Aquarius or Capricorn son, someone with their birthday in January, February that you've ever known, they probably had maybe like a stoicism about them, but like sort of like this ability, just sort of this demonstrated capability of being able to handle serious things, like being able to keep shit together, often the one that like when everything's hitting the fan, you're like, oh, call in the Capricorn, call in the Aquarius, because they have a way. They're Saturnian. It's like bringing order to chaos in terms of sort of like that stern, structured implementation of structure where it's badly needed in order to achieve a result for the whole. Uh, and it's often easy to take for granted those people in your life because it's like, oh, you must be fun at parties. Well, yeah, if shit hits the fan at the party, it's all fun and games, but then it's like you're gonna call in the Saturnian friend to give a little order to this chaos and make sure everyone has a good time. Like, oh, no one did the party planning. Uh, we want to have nice Venusian fun times, but like it requires planning. It requires structure. It requires ironing out the details, putting in the effort in the weeks leading up to the party in order for the balance, the harmony, the Venusian good time to happen, right? So this is the nature of Saturn is let's see, let me see if I have any keywords too that might help. Responsibility, I've said structure, order, patience is necessarily a big part of that. Limits and boundaries, but also dignity and authority are very much a part of the realm of Saturn. And so when I get into, I guess the mythology is, I'm a little shaky on keeping Roman and Greek mythology separate, so bear with me. Um, the mythology of Saturn is also quite an interesting like play in to just archetypal themes, because Saturn, also known I believe Saturn is the Roman term, but then in Greek mythology it would be Kronos. So we've got Saturn, who, you've seen a lot of the depictions, Saturn devouring his son. Uh, well, Saturn was essentially given the task of, so mythology goes, of separating heaven and earth. So therefore becoming the god of time, the ruler of time. So clocks, time, like I said, aging, um, thresholds, those are all within the purview of Saturn. And, you know, anyone that's sort of like been in a time where you see where you are in a liminal space where it seems like heaven and earth are totally blurred, and you're just kind of in ecstasy, a period of just total escapism, whether it's in your happy place or in a magical garden or anything where time escapes you. You feel you're sort of escaping the realm of Saturn, don't you? You sort of feel like time is irrelevant. You just sort of, time gets lost. And we all know what those moments are like, but it's funny. So when you look at the mythology of the god being given the task of separating heaven and earth, um, thereby creating time, that rings quite true in our experience of time. Time is a reminder of our mortality, right? I mean, because that is a limit on life without an acknowledgement, in terms of the passage of time, is just sort of how could you tell the difference between heaven and earth, the earthly realm and the heavenly otherworldly realm? So Saturn is that structure that sort of reminds us of our mortality, and therefore reminding us that what we do while we are here on this earthly realm matters, because their time's a ticking. It matters because, have you ever found also that periods of joy and when you experience true satisfaction and bliss, have you ever noticed that it generally comes um, following a period of hardship, or at least like a hard fought win? So like, um, it's like, if you're in school and you're studying, and everyone's going on spring break, and you're in this new course of study, and you don't get to go and participate in the fun, and you miss your best friend's bachelor party, or you miss all these things that are fun and whatnot. But that in the end, the payoff of putting in this effort and making these sacrifices are really going to create a sense of satisfaction, a sense of joy, bliss, that doesn't compare to a life without boundaries or limits. So it's almost sort of that love-hate relationship that we all have, I guess, on a subconscious level with Saturn, because it's like we don't want limitations, we don't want a budget, we don't want to have a time limit at the beautiful garden, and we don't want to have the like rules. We just want to be able to do what we want. But like without those structures, it would be just chaos, right? I mean, so when we're younger, we associate Saturn with authority figures, right? Like, parents. Uh, it's literally associated with the father, but it could be just any parental figure. Not everyone has a father in their life. It it could just be, if you're raised by your grandparents, raised by just other authority figures, doesn't matter. Those are the Saturnian figures in your life. And then as you get older, the Saturnian figures shift, do they not? And as you become an adult and kind of realize that you are the overseer of your own life, and how things go and how things work out or don't, take that personal accountability, I guess, is you become the Saturnian figure, as it turns out. And I guess any resistance to that understanding is probably associated, if you can relate. um, I can, any resistance to that truth is probably associated with a not so smooth time in your life, right? Because and a lot of people learn this when they go off to college for the first time. They leave home and they're just left to their own judgment, and it becomes obvious like who understands that you are the captain now of your life. No one's going to be there to tell you that you can or can't do something. It's kind of up to you. So Saturn very much is a links very, I guess, neatly with the theme of inner authority in terms of growing older, the shifting of authority figures from childhood being your parents and actual people to as you become an adult. Um, Inner authority when it comes to personal choices, but also in terms of outwardly, it does also represent like governments, institutions, the rule making bodies. So um, the mythology is also very interesting here because in mythology, Saturn's sons were Jupiter and Neptune, at least the ones that he didn't devour. So Jupiter and Neptune in in Greek mythology, we would call them Zeus and Poseidon. Jupiter and Neptune are the co-rulers of Pisces. So Pisces is the one of the water signs. I believe it's the oldest water sign, and it is associated with the ocean. And it's Poseidon, the god of the ocean. And you look at the sign, like the planetary symbol for Neptune, and it looks like little pitch, like the Poseidon's trident, or I think that's the word. But it's interesting because right now we have Saturn in the sign of Pisces. So it's quite literally Father Saturn having his transit through the sign of one of his sons, co-ruled, I guess, by his sons, both of the sons, Jupiter and Neptune. And today, what's interesting is it went direct today. So back in June 17th, this past summer, it went retrograde. And what that generally means is like it doesn't literally move backwards, but like based on the vantage point from Earth, it looks like it slows down, like because of the pace of the movement of that planet relative to us. It looks quite literally like it has slowed down because of our relative transits and movements, orbits um, between Saturn and Earth. So that's what the retrograde period basically means for all planets. But it went retrograde June 17th, okay? So it was just today that it stationed direct. So it was at 7 degrees of Pisces when it went retrograde, June 17th. And it currently is at 0 degrees of Pisces. So within that period of time, it has gone from 7 degrees of Pisces, the constellation Pisces, to 0, just sort of hovering right by the 29th degree of Aquarius, right? So it is stationed direct today. And if you really want to have your mind blown about how these things tend to play out in world events, do you know what happened June 18th? Does anyone remember what happened June 18th of this summer, the day after Saturn stationed retrograde? Well, that was when we had the Titan submersible, I should say, disaster where it imploded on its way to go explore the Titanic. And this is one of those events to where every astrologer online was like, are you guys seeing this? Are you kidding me? Because, if you remember the earlier this year, it was like the sort of attack of the killer whales. It was like all of these orcas sort of like revolting against humans. Like it was like the sea letting us know that we had not been good stewards of the sea. You know, it's like there were videos everywhere of these killer whales just like totally like ganging up on people, like in large groups, like congregating and going after people, like in ways that we just hadn't seen before. And the astrology of it was like, oh my goodness, like I think the ocean is I think the ocean's mad at us. Like the Saturn in Pisces transit is really something, huh? So, June 17th it goes retrograde, and then June 18th, it's it's not only just the hubris, I've talked about associated with Jupiter, the hubris of these, extremely wealthy people getting in this like, PlayStation controller operated piece of like tin and just being like, oh, it's cool to work, and going way farther down than like, the just science would suggest was even feasible, let alone within the realm of like, rational behavior. Um, I mean, that was hubris, like at its, well, I say finest, but what I really mean is like worse, most tragic, I guess. And the fact that that just happened the day after Saturn stations retrograde in Pisces, and what even makes it more like mind blowing is the name of the, like, if y'all remember, the name of the submersible was Ocean Gate. It's like quite literally ocean and gate literally being a boundary, a threshold. Like it could not have been a more literal play. And Ocean Gate also being like this, how we add gate to like anything scandalous or just wild that sort of like captures the collective attention, so and so gate, or like, whatever gate. Well, they named the submersible Ocean Gate. It was almost like, if I didn't know better, I'm like, somebody has an astrologer that doesn't like them very much and like is having a good laugh. Like it still kind of freaks me out when I look back at it. But still in all, the way that that played out was just sort of like, I mean, this tragedy, but also when, you say the astrology sometimes is like, uh, it can be quite literal. That was definitely one of those instances to where I almost just couldn't believe what I saw unfolding. I was just like, are you guys seeing this? And so, um, what's really interesting is before Saturn entered Pisces, um, it was in the sign before Pisces, which is Aquarius. And Saturn entered Aquarius, I want to say March of 2020. Okay, the transit of Saturn takes about 2.5 to 3 years per sign. So, does everyone remember what March 2020 was the eve of? Well, that was the pandemic. That was like sort of the last days before everything hit the fan. And when you look at the astrology of that, Aquarius is it's an air sign, and it is ruled by Saturn, and it is ruled by Uranus. So Uranus is, and that's like Uranus is one of the more modern planets. So like the traditional ruler of Aquarius was Saturn, but then once Uranus was discovered, it was given the title of co-ruler of Aquarius. And Uranus is like associated with like radical change, like sometimes in an instant upheaval, um, often just unpredictable, chaotic upheaval, and like sort of like a lightning bolt. And so when you also consider that Aquarius rules communications, the collective, so any sort of collective gathering, communications, it also rules airborne diseases and like air travel. So air travel in general, but including of um, illness, like respiratory, like transmittable illnesses. And so then when you really think of the astrology of Saturn being, in its home sign of Aquarius, and what happened as a result, quite literally airborne illness, quite literally sort of like an upheaval that seemed to come out of nowhere in terms of the way our lives worked, or stopped working, as the case was, um, and also the limits now placed on the collective, on gathering. Um, Aquarius quite literally is like community, gathering, congregating, whether it was church or like the coffee shop or even just any public spaces. It was this like sort of stern hand of Saturn, and it was sad. And then anyone that defied those boundaries, restrictions, you know, the the price was often their lives, and not like in sort of a fault sort of way, just in like what happens, like the consequences of the action of defying the limitations of this new airborne illness that we all found uh, dictating how our lives went. And so when I talk about Saturn and you talk about karma, so karma is the term that is Saturn. Saturn is the karma planet. So that's when I have the scales of justice out here and I talk about karma. And karma is like a very loose, like we overuse it all the time for sure. It's like karma, oh, they got their instant karma. Well, rarely is karma instant. Sometimes it is, but like in like usually like a lighter sense. It's like, oh, you like stick your hand on the stove, instant karma, like the shit is hot and that hurts and now I have a burn. But when it comes to Saturnian karma, it's quite literally the natural consequence of our actions, and often associated with a pattern of actions or inactions, like slacking off on your teeth cleaning or whatever, or just engaging in steadily problematic, behavior that kind of adds up over time into something that, you might feel like is like, oh, this is unfair. But really, like from the outside, it's sort of just like, well, yeah, that's the natural consequence of X, Y, and Z behaviors. So that is why Saturn is associated with karma. It's known as the karmic planet because it just essentially gives us the natural result or consequences of our behaviors, actions, inactions over time. So karma, it's not always bad. Like the karma of flossing your teeth every night is by the time you hit 50, you're probably gonna have all your teeth. Whereas like the people that were just like guzzling Mountain Dew and not brushing their teeth every night, well, they're going to have their karma. And it doesn't even have anything to do with who's a good person or who's not. It's just, that's not what Saturn isn't making value judgments. It's just there to sort of deliver the verdict of a pattern of behavior, action or inaction over an extended period of time. So interesting, it's a natural uh, it's a natural thing to not, of course, not only govern bones, teeth, time, literally like clocks, stuff like that, but also agriculture. Saturn rules over agriculture. And if you think about what is required um, when it comes to having like a bountiful harvest and to feed populations, that is very much the nature of Saturn, right? I mean, Saturn is agriculture from its very, from the very first moment you're planting a seed to reaping the harvest. It quite literally is reaping what you sow. It quite literally is you put in the work and you get up at dawn and you tend to the crops. That means come the end of the summer, everyone's eating all winter. Um, so it's very easy to remember that in terms of a Saturnian theme is ruling over agriculture. That checks out. Um, so Saturn rules over essentially anything that is associated with, um, delayed gratification, but also any cold, dark place is the realm of Saturn. So when you think about the season too, when you think about when Capricorn season and Aquarius season are, well, that's like the dead of winter. When you think of when I talked about my Mars struggle in the Little Tree That Could video, I talked about how when you look at the bare bones of the tree, so to speak, when all the leaves fall and all you see are the you see the structure of the branches, which I think is quite beautiful in most cases, at least with the trees I have. That's very Saturnian, and it's you know depending on what your tastes are. We all love Venusian abundance, and I love seeing the leaves and all that come in the spring. But there is a beauty to the stripped down, like the essence of something that when it goes into that dormant stage and it kind of weathers the cold and dark, um, sort of like the grit, right? It's the grit of a thing. It's where you kind of like, that's why, especially traditional Christmas celebrations, it's almost like um, associated with this like merriment, like in simple ways, like you're in the middle of winter and everyone's like has shorter days and it's cold and dark, and then here comes this gathering uh, where we get together, and instead of having the very Saturn themed days of the winter that is setting in, we gather and we have like the warmth of the fire, and there's like this very Venusian quality to the holiday gatherings, and that sort of is supposed to hold you over, into the Capricorn and Aquarius season, sort of feed you to get you through January, February, and then come March, we're inching closer to spring, and where we get to see like the life and color coming back to things, and leaves and things filling out. Um, so Saturn, I very much have a very Saturn loud Saturn presence in my chart. I have an Aquarius Sun, and I have a Capricorn Venus. So I have found that Saturn has always made its presence known in the themes of my life, and I've always uh, learned, sometimes the hard way, of the how loud Saturn can be based on things that I have or have not done, work that I did put in or didn't put in, whatever the case was. So I wanted everyone to sort of understand that the karmic nature of Saturn and it going direct, what it probably feels, it's going to be different for everyone, because Pisces, depending on, I've said in another video, where your rising sign is, which sets the framework for the houses, whatever house Pisces rules in your chart is where that Saturnian theme, that's where you're feeling it right now, whether you realize it or not. That is where the Saturnian, you might even feel like, it might feel like, I don't know if pressure is the right word. Maybe sort of this, it could feel a lot like what was once obscured is now a lot clearer, because when you put Saturn retrograde, and so therefore it's like sort of taking the edge off, you're just left with Pisces, which again, the rulers are Jupiter, optimism, whatever Jupiter touches, it expands. Optimism and being jovial and higher level thinking, sort of like getting into the philosophical side of things. And Neptune, I characterized it the other day to keep it short, I said Delulu Lemon. And that's true, but it's, to be fair, it's also associated with like a romanticism, transcendence, spirituality. So when I say liminal spaces, that's often where that's the realm of where great art is made and where great romances are formed. Often, unfortunately, sometimes the romances are propelled by the other themes of Neptune, which is illusions, delusion. Romanticism is a word that necessarily can be good or bad. Romanticism is sort of like seeing the beauty of things around. So when Saturn, is retrograde in Pisces, and you might find yourself having a more an enhanced appreciation for the simple beauty and things around, for the arts. You might find yourself drawing more, tapping more into your creative artistic side. But with romanticism also comes, failing to account for the Saturnian, failing to account for the reality of things when the rose-colored glasses come off, so to speak. So just like every energy, it's all a balance. And I would say that a life wouldn't be worth living without seeing the having a sense of idealism and romanticism and higher level thinking and spirituality. We need all of those things, but those things need a framework and a structure, or else we're just kind of floating around and um, not putting the sentiments into making use of them, putting them in action. So one thing that you might have noticed, and it's definitely characteristic of Saturn being in Pisces, is if we want to be literal, Pisces being dreamy and like a watery sign associated with the ocean and feelings. And then you put Saturn in there, you might say it gives a sense of structure and order to imagination and artistic vision. So uh, in history, so I guess I would say the last transit of Saturn in Pisces would have been in the 90s. It would have been about 30, 29, 28, 30 years ago. Um, and when you look at the art, like if you really are curious, Google Saturn in Pisces in the 90s, and it'll give you like an exact window. And then consider um, the art that came out of that, the fashion, and what's really funny is you see a lot of those themes reemerging because, especially in fashion, it's like, oh, everything comes back around. Uh, Almost all the time when I've pulled the threads on those, like, oh, why is this fashion coming back? It can almost always be associated with a transit. Just each time, it's uncanny. So if you've noticed a reemergence of 90s culture, 90s fashion, 90s entertainment, 90s bands, all of a sudden, like the youngs, the Gen Z will be like talking about this band or that band. And the millennials like me are just like, oh, yeah, yeah, I grew up on that. Well, it's funny because it's like, it's just Saturn and Pisces coming back around doing its thing. So the younger people are like rediscovering these forms of art that were born under the last Saturn and Pisces transit. It's just so fascinating. Like I remember I saw some younger person on Twitter, I think, saying something about uh, the band. I don't know if anyone remembers the band Whole, like Courtney Love's band, and just rediscovering like the grunge movement and Nirvana and like the flannel shirts and all that, and we're all like, yeah, yeah, we already saw that. We were young people then, and like I think I was probably like, I don't remember how old was I then. Like I wasn't even 10 years old then, but still, it was like uh, I guess middle school age. So it's like the looking up to the older kids and seeing the fashion and culture that they're engaging in. So that very much was like the standout cultural movement that I observed growing up. So these Saturn and Pisces transits are very much associated with like art, but like often in new forms, like sort of this um, imaginative, uh, sort of blurring the line between reality and like the ethers. Um, and so the transcendent kind of quality, very, especially fashion. You look at like the runways, and it's very much like this ethereal vibe. You see a lot of like mermaid type color schemes and like the um, almost like glittery and sequins and like just the sparkle. It's very, very Saturn and Pisces. And again, it's the Saturn is what creates the art, because anyone that's creative and artistic, I very much am familiar with this. It's one thing to have the vision and the ideas, but it requires that Saturn to make it concrete, to bring it to life. And that is often where the struggle for creatives is the Saturn. But I guess that's why I'm making this extra video on Saturn, because you know, it can be hard to, especially if you have tons of ideas and you're always in that imagination space. It can be hard to nail any one thing down and to make it real, bring it into reality. Um, and I encourage you to sort of embrace the spirit of Saturn going direct today. It might feel like a little bit much. I heard one astrologer describe it. I think this was like a really good description of it. Is when you have a picture like a large ocean vessel, just kind of cruising along at this sort of consistent pace in the ocean, and then um, when it's set to turn around to change course, um, what happens is, like, it's going, and then it's like something really large slows down and it comes to a stop. It's almost that, like, you feel the weight of it right before it changes direction. There's that period to where it's like, whoa, you almost feel all of the weight of it before it changes course. And that is maybe what I would say today could have felt like to you. It just depends on what area of life that Pisces rules in your chart. So if you want to know what the I'll finish by, I was going to start with this story, but I think it was like still sort of annoying me. So, but since we're giving examples, so Pisces rules over my ninth house. And it's funny because I've talked plenty about the ninth house in the videos about Jupiter. So the ninth house ruling higher level learning and like spiritual studies and sort of researching things that you want to know more about, and morals and ethics and all that. So earlier today, like, I had this grand plan um, about this video. I was like going to do more research on the mythology of it, because I admitted at the beginning I'm very shaky on the Greek versus Roman mythology, and I was just going to get really into it and be like, well, this, and that. And then Uranus was the sky god, and I do remember that Uranus in the mythology was, I think, Saturn's father that he ended up usurping and like overthrowing. Um, so I was going to do all that. I had all these grand plans, right? It was going to be great, and I like got some books out and started taking notes. And I've told you before, I had the two old dogs, and one of them, Bear, she's blind and she has limited mobility, but she also is like, some days she requires a lot more work than others. Like, being that old, as a matter of fact, she's literally like coming in here now, like probably about to demand like a treat or something, or bop into a wall and make me nervous. So with her old age has come a lot more responsibility. It used to be me and another person here sharing in that responsibility. And when it's just me and I'm, trying to keep the wheels turning in the other parts of the house in my life, um, grand plans about researching the mythology of Saturn uh, will often take a back seat, despite my best intentions to just go all in on the ninth house and learn some more stuff, like the higher learning of my Pisces ruling over my ninth house. Saturn going direct today had something else to say. Saturn was like, no, you thought you were going to research Saturn more, and you thought you were going to look into the mythology a little bit deeper and make like this more comprehensive little video recording, but your old dog requires more responsibility, and therefore you're reminded of the limitations of your life. That's what Saturn does. But the thing Saturn also does is, I'm very well aware that one day she will not be here. And I am very well aware, as someone who feels like they always kind of are sitting in communion with like those I've lost, so familiar with grief, and I'm so familiar with the feelings that come. um I am comforted by knowing that of all the things I will feel when she's not here, the one thing I will not fear or feel is regret. I won't feel like I wish I had put more time in. I won't feel bad or guilty or any of that about what I could have done for her. Could I have done more? And that, of course, would be within the purview of Saturn also, is had I just, ignored her needs and just like, had I just said, oh, whatever, I've got my things to do and put her in a crate for, the last months of her life or whatever, um, that might have gotten me somewhere in the immediate sense. And I mean that like very literally, like in the very immediate sense. I get to do what I want for longer. I get to be gone from my house for longer and I get to go and do more fun things. But the cost, of course, is when she is no longer here, and then the feelings that come looking back on the work that I did or did not put in now. So, um, I know Saturn can seem like a big, the wrath of Saturn, the wrath of karma, but um, I don't know. I kind of look at it more as like um, the natural consequences, and by that I mean like the rewards also of behaviors put in little by little over time. Um, and so with that comes sort of the reminder of what these months, like what the final stretch of 2023 um, could present to you is Saturn being in Pisces, regardless of what area of life it rolls over, depending on your chart. The theme of bringing structure to imagination applies to everybody. So that could apply to, say it rolls over your 10th house, which is like career and reputation and like legacy. That could mean starting a business, as a creative. It could mean, say it's in your 11th house, rolling over groups and like humanitarian causes and friends and hopes and dreams. And it could mean like starting an organization, like, for some greater good cause, some sort of a human rights cause, and like, where it's based in dreaminess and like imagination, bringing structure to that to really make it a reality and improve the lives of people that need it right now. It could mean if it's in your 12th house, it could mean bringing bringing a plan to life. Say you've always wanted to go on some retreat, some sabbatical, some sort of because the 12th house is very mysterious, but it's often associated with like isolation and like, you would find it's very closely linked to the ninth house in terms of spirituality, but the 12th house is very specifically like isolation and sort of like endings, but sort of not necessarily in the death sense. It could be, but it could just mean sort of contemplating endings and becoming more in touch with like that sort of uh, side of yourself and the inevitable parts of all of our lives that, involve endings and like isolation. It's where you might find yourself like on a yoga retreat or something like that, just bringing form to what originates in a space of like imagination and dreaminess and possibly like elements of escapism. So I hope this lesson in Saturn was helpful and that you just rest assured, if you felt that pressure, that sort of, whoa, here goes Saturn, like stationing direct, it's fine. Like everyone feels it. Um, but on that note, Saturn being the ruler of also metals, I hope that you will remember a little bit more the theme by seeing what the tarnished metals at the beginning of the video now becoming bright and shiny like they're supposed to look after the effort of cleaning them up, um, kind of drives home what Saturn really means is time passing, but also work put in to reap a reward, either, immediately or in the future. Until next time.